guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you are doing well. If you are new to the channel, welcome and thank you for finding us. I want to give a big shout out to our patrons because we are talking today about 5 Element Ninjas. Hell yeah. So this is in the Shout Factory Shaw Classics Volume 4 set. This is just the disc that I pulled out of the set that I brought in to show off. It's a double feature, so it's 5 Element Ninjas and the Sword Stained with Royal Blood. This one here is 5 Element Ninjas. This movie came out in 1982, is directed by Chang Cheh. And the reason I'm giving a shout out to our patrons is twofold. Not only did I buy the Shaw Classics Volume 4 set with money from Patreon, so huge shout out to our patrons for that. I also put up a poll in Patreon asking what I should be reviewing, and this won the poll. So you are seeing this because it was voted upon by our patrons. This is a classic Shaw Brothers movie. It's a classic Chang Cheh film. I did a list a couple of years ago of 10 essential Shaw films. It was not in any way meant to be the greatest Shaw films of all time or my 10 favorite. I just trying to create a list of like what I thought would be kind of a well-rounded overview of like the Shaw martial arts films. This movie was not on the list. The reason being that it was kind of similar to some other movies I had on the list, but it was on my whatever 15 or 20 that I whittled it down to get 10 from. But this was by far the movie that most people commented about, saying, "What, you don't have 5 Element Ninjas on the list?" So today we are talking about 5 Element Ninjas. I'm not going to review the disc on here. There is some bonus material, but I'm going to talk. Man, let me tell you what's on here. There's a new audio commentary with James Mudge, veteran Hong Kong film critic at Eastern Kicks. Audio commentary with film historian Brian Bankston. That's new. There's a new video called In His Element, which is an interview with veteran actor Chu Kei, and a new video called Enter the Ninjas, interview with David West, critic and author of Chasing Dragons, an introduction to martial arts. So there you go. There's a lot to say about this movie. Let me tell you who's in it first. Oh, and I also want to mention the writer because I'm going to talk a little bit about some of like the story mechanics and stuff like that. Chang Cheh was the director. Chang Cheh co-wrote the script with Ni Kwan. It stars Ricky Cheng, Lo Meng, Chan Pai Sui, Michael Chan, like a butt ton of people you will recognize if you've watched a lot of films from this era. I had forgotten that Michael Chan was in this movie. I think this is my 3rd or 4th time seeing this film. I totally forgot that Michael Chan was in it. So when he showed up, I was like, yes, Michael Chan. He plays the King of Ninjas. Amazing. It's amazing that it's not like, oh, there's like a leader of the ninja clan or they have like a boss. He's the King of Ninjas. Hell yeah. That's one of the things so amazing about this movie is how like campy it is, but how like it almost seems like it's inspired by like gonzo sci-fi movies from the 50s with like the way the costumes are and some of the sets. And I know that that was like typical of Shaw. There's this one particular group of ninjas who wear like all gold. And they have these gold hats that reflect the sun. And they reminded me of the suits that like either space suits or like suits that aliens would wear in like a 50s sci-fi movie. And I had that kind of element to it that I really like. There's like a mondo campiness to this movie, but it's also a really freaking good movie. I wanted to mention one other person involved in this film, and then I'll get into my thoughts on it. The director of photography, whose name is Nico Wang Man Wan. He was the DP for Drunken Master 2. He did Little Dragon Maiden, which is a batshit insane Shaw Brothers movie, Hong Kong Godfather. He was a second unit cinematographer on Super Cop, and then he was on the camera team for Prison on Fire, so that guy had quite a career. So let me put the Blu-ray down here. Showed that off to you, I think, sufficiently. What are my thoughts on this film? First of all, like I said, there's like this glorious campiness to it. It's like a great Shaw film. It has like the amazing sets, the costumes. There are scenes where you can see like the seams on the set, right? It has that like really heightened artificiality that is so essential to Shaw that to me is one of like the comfort food aspects of watching these Shaw films is that you know you're going to get that, right? The costumes and the environments that they're in are like these really brightly lit studio environments, and there's water. This is like a really specific particular thing. I love sets with water in them. I think it's so cool to think about people like being on a soundstage making a movie and there's like a giant water tank as part of the set and like building the ground up around the water. I just think it's so cool when there's sets with water because water is such like a natural element and it's such a chaotic thing that is so hard to control. And then to see it in a set, which is this not chaotic at all and very tightly controlled. It's really interesting to me. I don't know. It's like this like primal thing that I respond to really well. I love water sets. I know it's like a weird thing, but like the costumes are very outlandish. And like if you've never seen this film, the basic setup is I should have started with this. there's, I mean, it's classic Shaw, right? And then I can segue from this into my, there were two things about Chang Cheh in particular that I was thinking about while I was watching this film that I want to talk about in this video. It's very classic Shaw Brothers setup. You have two rival martial arts schools, groups, whatever they are, and they're having a contest where the masters are like, talking smack on each other, and then the pupils fight one another to see who is superior. And the school wearing all white ends up being much better at martial arts than the other school, but then the other school calls in an unexpected participant who is a samurai, a Japanese guy. He ends up losing. This is like not really a spoiler because it's the opening scene, basically. If you don't want to know anything about this movie, you may skip ahead like 30 seconds or whatever. The samurai guy loses his fight and so commits seppuku, like ritualistic suicide, which in typical Chang Cheh fashion is very bloody. And before he does that, he tells the head of the school, you got to call my homie from in Japan, send him a letter, whatever, right? Call him, as before phones. Send a letter, send a carrier pigeon to my homie in Japan. This is his name. Tell him what went down here. So the homie, it turns out, is the king of ninjas. And so the ninjas are like, yeah, let's ride. We got to get revenge. So they come over from Japan and they challenge this school to combat them in like the 5-element ninja styles, right? So, but this kung fu school is like, what is ninja style? And we're like, what are the 5 elements? Like, they have no idea what it is, right? So then it just kind of goes from there. Like, people are fighting, people die, and it's kind of this back and forth kind of thing. And then you get a little bit of like intrigue and backstabbing and stuff like that, because someone from the ninja camp tries to go undercover into like the other martial arts school and kind of like tear it apart from the inside, which is one of my favorite parts of this movie. That section of the film is really, really cool. And you have these two pupils of the master of the school who are very, very close to one another, but like disagree on certain fundamental things. And someone's undercover and she's like trying to turn them against one another. It's a very interesting like setup. And the movie kind of goes through these acts, if you will. Like the opening act is like a lot of like visceral, violent fighting. And there's so much fighting in this movie. Like there's so much fighting in this movie. Then you have like kind of the intrigue section, and then you have a final section that's like the one of the characters' like redemption arc in a way. So you go through these movements within the film. It's segmented in a really interesting way. So this is what I want to talk about with Chang Cheh. This is something I've mentioned before. I think I mentioned this when I talked about Two Champions of Shaolin before on this channel, because that's a film in which you really, really see this. But I think that this is also a film in which you really, really see this. And I want to mention Chang Cheh in particular, but Ni Kwan as his co-writer. The narratives of Chang Cheh's films are like perfect, right? And I don't mean to say they're like the greatest narratives ever created or anything like that. But if you look at like what he is doing, or he and his co-writer, what they're trying to do, like what the kind of narrative they're attempting to create and the style of filmmaking that they're working within, the narratives are perfect. And what I mean by that is that there is not a single scene in this film that is not driving it somewhere, right? So you have this opening fight, and that sets up the whole movie of this rivalry, and every single scene in the movie moving forward from there pushes the story toward its conclusion and adds information about like character and world. There's no wasted moment at all. So if you like, there's no, I'm just trying to think of like a comparison film. Nothing is coming to mind right away, but like there's no moment in this film, for instance, where like two characters step outside of what's going on and just have like a kind of innocuous conversation. Even when there's backstory, it exists in service of forward movement, right? So an example of this is there's a point in this film where a character is able to perform a certain task. There's a backstory as to why he can do that. So we get a flashback. The reason the flashback is there and the reason the backstory exists is to push the movie and the character forward. So like everything is pushing from the beginning to the end of the film, right? If you think of like the beginning of the film is train station A. The end of the film is train station B. Every single thing that is happening in the movie is pushing the movie, if it's the train, in this scenario, in this analogy, toward the next station. Like there's never a point where it stops between those locations. And I think it's really, really, really impressive. Like the discipline to be able to do that, and to be able to do it over and over and over again with the number of films that Chang Cheh made, I think is very, very impressive. The other thing that I think is really interesting about Chang Cheh, which I have often felt while watching his films, but I never really verbalized before, because I don't think I've ever done like an analytical review of a Chang Cheh film before. Like I don't think I've ever sat down and taken like copious notes while watching one of his films before. I usually just watch them for fun. I don't know if that's like entirely true. Like I may have reviewed other films of his, but I can't really remember off the top of my head. But the point being, one of the qualities that I think is very, very definitive of his style that is unique to him that I find really interesting is I think that there's like an objectivity and almost an amorality to his view as the filmmaker. What I mean by that is that in a Chang Cheh film, you don't have like, these are the good guys and they're so, so good and they would never do anything wrong. And they're like, you know, these great people who you like really want to root for and really feel bad for. And then those guys are the baddest, horrible people ever, right? Like it's almost arbitrary who the hero is. The hero just happens to be the character who we are following along this journey. They're not necessarily like the good guy, right? Think about this within the context of this film. What happens at the beginning of the movie is someone dies and their friends come to get revenge. Now, we're following the people who the revenge is being brought upon. So we kind of think of them as the good guys. But if we flipped it over to the other way, and the movie starts in Japan at the ninja school, and they get a letter, and it's like, our friend has died, you know, you got to go get revenge for him, and we followed those guys, they would be the heroes of the film. It almost feels arbitrary who the good guys are. What Chang Cheh is doing when he makes a film is he is showing you a series of events that is violent, compulsive, brutal, usually really fascinating, interesting, hilarious, campy, ridiculous, right? But it's entertainment and it's a story told from a kind of objective, distanced vantage point, rather than this thing of like emotional involvement of trying to lead the audience by the hand, telling them what to feel. It's kind of it's almost like he's a journalist, right? And like he's giving you, and by journalist, I mean like more of like an old school style journalist than like a contemporary style opinion peddler, right? But like a journalist who, or like, you know, like a long form style journalist who, rather than like, you know, like a whatever, like 24-hour news cycle journalist, but like someone who like actually does a lot of research for articles and stuff like that, whose job it is to collect facts and present a story and then let the audience draw their own conclusions and you know, put their own kind of perspective on it and stuff like that, right? It's a very interesting way to make films because and I feel like David Fincher in a way is kind of like that. I think not as much so, but it's a lot of filmmakers tend to have like a very strong perspective and really want you to feel a certain way, or really try to move you emotionally through a story and get you to connect with and relate to certain characters. And I feel like Chang Cheh is not trying to do that at all. And I think that's something that makes his films really, really interesting. But I mean, also it's just like batshit entertainment, right? And there are so many scenes in this movie that are so good. And there's a lot of reversals in this film, which was something I was noticing too as I watched it, which I think that's another big part of his style, is that, you know, the character who's on the back foot changes a lot in his movies. In this movie, the ninja really have the upper hand for like the vast majority of the runtime of the film. And that's really like, if your villains are stronger than your hero, that makes for good drama because it creates tension for the audience, right? And there's like some really good dramatic irony in here where there's the character who goes undercover and the audience knows who it is, but the other characters don't. So there's tension for us because we're waiting to see if they're going to discover it and what's going to happen, right? So that's very simple like writing, but it's a good device that works very well in this film. And but the reversal is essentially when, you know, something is happening and then the situation changes, and then the character has to react to the change, and then it may change again, right? So like you'll have this a lot within thrillers, or in a good action, like a good example of a reversal might be, and I just recently watched John Wick 3. So in John Wick 3, there's this scene where John Wick is having like a shootout with all of these people wearing like helmets and masks and stuff like that. And at first you think, oh, he's just going to go in and start shooting them and then they'll all be dead. And then it turns out they're wearing like bulletproof armor, right? So he goes to shoot one, it doesn't do anything. So that's a reversal. It's like we assume John Wick is going to go here and kill all these people. Bing, they're wearing armor. Reversal, new problem. What does he do because they're wearing armor? And then if he solves that problem, other reversal, you're right. So it's like it keeps you on your toes, and they're kind of switching the direction of the drama and creating obstacles for the character, essentially. And that's done very well in this film. So the film is 5 Element Ninjas. I'll show you the Blu-ray again. I thank the wonderful people of Patreon Link is in the description of the video, by the way, if you want to go check out Patreon. But I thank the wonderful people of Patreon for choosing this in the poll, because it was really, really, really fun to revisit this film, and for being members of Patreon so that I could buy this Blu-ray set in the first place. I'm very, very excited to watch more films from this set. Do let me know in the comments what you think about this film, what your favorite Chang Cheh films are, what your favorite ninja movies are. I haven't seen too many ninja. I know there's like all the Sho Kosugi ninja movies and stuff like that. But yeah, and all that other fun stuff. So my name is Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. As always, we thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.